Guys, thank you so much for joining. Should I wait for you to read the session code and all, or can I get started?
Please go ahead. I'll be
Amit?
pasting the session code in the chat.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let's get started then. Hope you guys can see my screen, hear me okay.
Yes, you are all set.
Okay, super. First of all, guys, before I start, thank you so much for taking time on a Saturday. I know all of you are busy. You guys have busy schedules, especially working remote. There's a lot of information overload which happens. But thank you so much for taking time for joining the session. Let me introduce myself. My name is Karthik Nagarajan. I work for Infosys. I'm an industry principal. I focus on data privacy architecture, and I'm a part of a product team. The product is called Infosys Enterprise Data Privacy Suite. That's our data privacy product. I work for a division called Center for Emerging Technology Solutions. So ideally, that means that we work on the emerging side of the technology. We are very proud partners of Azure. So today, we are going to talk about some of the learnings we have had working in the data privacy space for the last 10 years. We also want to talk about some of the best practices and architecture which we need to take into consideration when you're building your Azure ecosystem, right? And as the session suggests, there is always a privacy paradox. How much of privacy is good for your AI ML pipeline or your data analysis to work effectively? So that is what is going to be the crux of the discussion. I know it's post-lunch session, so I'm going to repeat this. Let's keep it interactive. Anytime you want to ask a question, feel free to interrupt or post your question. I'll be more than happy to get started and answer your question. So this is what I had planned for you guys today. I want to share some of the observations we have, some of the customer conversations we have had on data privacy with some of our customers. I want to take some time, define the privacy paradox with you. Want to share some of the key challenges and learnings we have seen with enterprise customers working in the Azure ecosystem, right? And then I want to talk about how do we solve this paradox, right? How do we ensure data privacy is maintained at the same time your AI ML pipeline also is taken care, right? The data utility is taken care. So how do we balance those two things, right? And if you guys have energy and if it time permits, I would like to take you through a demo and probably take you through some of the use cases on the Azure ecosystem. Right? So that's kind of a quick agenda. But you guys have any other thoughts, comments you want to talk about, regulations, data privacy, please put it in the chat. I'll pick it up as we go on. Why do we really have to talk about data today, right? All of you would have heard about this cliche, data is the new oil. We are all getting into data driven enterprise. Those are all there, right? But if you really scratch the surface, talk to your customers who have invested in data, right? And because everybody wants to talk about sentience, which is AI, and automation, which is machine learning, I want to also talk about that, right? So if you do a quick cross section of your customer base and ask them, hey, you've invested in AI last year, what is your ROI, right? If you see, one answer will be we haven't got an ROI, or it's very, very small today, right? It's yet to mature, right? And why are we struggling so much to mature when the whole enterprise is a data-driven enterprise? Where is it going wrong, right? And some of you would be privacy consultants, some of you would be data architects, some of you would be data scientists. All of you will have this problem, right? Failure rate of an AI project is very, very high. It's 9 out of 10, 90% is the failure. Why? If you ask enterprise architects, again, I didn't make these numbers, it's from Gartner, right? If you ask enterprise architects, they'll tell data utility is very, very, very low, right? Only 73% it goes west. So only rest you actually have a data utility, right? And not many people trust the data in their organization, right? And why such a dire situation? And when we are all putting money on AI, ML, natural language processing, deep learning, machine learning models, why, right? So probably there is a fundamental problem we need to solve in the data we consume for your AI ML, right? And this is some of these things you would have faced as an architect, as a data scientist, and you would also heard some of your customers talking about it, right? Um, Traceability of data. Oh, brilliant! I trained this model, but I don't know where this data came from, right? Explainability. That is still explainable AI is still an evolving area, and that is what we should have started our AI journey on, right? The second key challenge, which is close to heart, uh, data privacy, right? A couple of months back, we celebrated the third birthday of GDPR, right? So GDPR, California Act of Protection, Consumer Rights Act, Shrems 2, India Protection Bill, Personal Data Protection Bills, PDPA, all these things you would have heard while talking about data to your customer, right? Today, if you really look at it, every organization, your organization, my organization, every organization has to ensure individual data privacy is taken care, right? And lot of new regulations have come in the market, especially post-pandemic, right? Many of us are working remote. I'm sitting in my balcony and giving you this session. All of you are at home, right? Our whole digital workplace has changed. That also comes with a lot of data privacy risk. You order grocery through big basket, milk basket. You share a lot of information out. We talk to our families through WhatsApp today, right? A lot of personal information goes. So there is a legitimate need to take care of an individual privacy when you think about data, right? And then any data scientist will tell you about cognitive bias, right? We have heard about algorithms picking up only male candidates for a specific job. We would have heard about effect of chatbots getting trained only by the tasks they complete, right? Cognitive bias in data is a very big problem when you try to use it for data analysis or sentience, which is AI, right? Then I cannot share data securely. When I share data to um, say Kamlesh, who's there on the call, or Vijay, who's there in London, I don't have a good way to share this data, right? So can I securely share data? And finally, any AI ML model, you all know the algorithm gets better only when you have larger volumes of data, right? How do you create that large volume of data without having a data privacy risk? That itself is a bigger challenge for an organization, right? And just to summarize, these are the four key areas which you will see in the industry, right? One, these regulations. As we speak, there are more than 150 regulations across the globe. Every country has its own data privacy bill passed, right? Or regulated or revised in the last 1 year. Every state in US is going to come with this. We are in an Azure ecosystem. Lot of our customers are moving data from on-prem to cloud. When you move that data into cloud, how do you ensure right data privacy controls are put in, right? Today, for today's discussion, we will try to stick to the third use case, which is AI. How do we ensure privacy first? Data sets are generated for AI. That will be the examples I'll quote, but it doesn't mean we cannot talk about rest of the things. But we can absolutely go and talk about it, right? And finally, the last pillar is our bread and butter, right? As Infosys, we do a lot of offshoring, right? Data from US, from Europe has to be moved to India in terms of test data, in terms of development environment, in terms of the Azure Cosmo DB, which I have to use for reporting. All these data, when you move this data, the data privacy of the end customer should not be compromised, right? So data privacy regulation, moving into cloud, responsible AI, and secure offshoring. These are four macro trends we work on, and all of us will be impacted by one or more of these trends, right? And the size of a data privacy industry today could be around 10 to 12 billion, but it's bound to be 30 billion in the next 3 years. So that's a huge growth for an industry for in data privacy, right? And that's why you will be seeing a lot of startups coming, sharing, protecting data, encrypting data, etc. Now coming back to our third use case, which is responsible AI, right? This is a typical pipeline on Azure, right? I want data to be created for my AI ML. I will collect data, which nobody will tell you how you have to collect. So that is where we are going to solve the problem. See how we get the right data, right? And usually we'll talk to our IT team, we'll talk to our business team, get the data in one place. Then the data scientist comes in, right? Selection of, this is the glamorous stuff, right? Selecting the right algorithm. I want a natural language processing algorithm. I want to do bivariate analysis, right? All the good stuff, right? And then you create your model, you pick your model for your business problem, which your business has asked you to solve. And then you train the model and test the model, right? But how do you do that without right data? If your step one fails, all the other steps in your AI ML pipeline is bound to fail, right? And it need not be an AI ML pipeline. Couple of sessions back, I was seeing a data pipeline, right? Even any simple data pipeline, it could be for testing an application. Uh, it could be for running your reports. It could be for secure offshoring. Any of these things will get impacted, right? So step one is the key part. How do we find the right data, right? And that's what we'll be talking about in the rest of the conversation also, right? But this is what your AI ML engineer will do today, right? They'll find data, they'll select the algorithm, they'll build a model, they'll train and test this model, they will register this model for deployment, and then finally they'll deploy it, right? And this is a study we did. We did talk to some of our customers, data scientist team, right? And this is kind of an empathy map, if I can call it, right? If you really ask, this is the example we'll see also, right? Customers team, data scientists, if you ask, many of them will struggle in step one only. They'll tell, I have too many tools to find data, but I don't know which data to take. And I see data in multiple data stores. Some of them are on in RDBMS. Some of them are sitting in mainframe. Some of them are in social media. Some of them are in my Azure SQL server. Some of them are Azure Databricks is throwing out. I don't know how to deal with it, right? So that is where we need to start looking at a data journey, right? Then once you find it, this is what most of us do. We find the data in Kaggle, which is neither data protected or there is always a chance of data breach. Neither is it going to be accurate, right? So we take it, we compromise on our whole AI journey because we don't have the right data, right? And that is where I want to take a minute and talk about the actual privacy paradox, right? Any data, it can be an order data, it can be an image, it can be a call center text. Take any data, it will have two parts to it. One, how useful is this data for your analysis? At the same time, whose data have you used, right? The whose data who you're using is the privacy part. The how good is this data is data utility, right? Any way to preserve privacy. You can do encryption. You can synthetically generate data. You can mask data. You can obfuscate data. You can anonymize data. But all that you have to do, you will compromise data utility. So how do you ensure this balance is maintained? Compromising on data utility versus privacy. If the data utility is very high, you will probably tell who the customer is, right? So you cannot open up somebody's individual privacy information. At the same time, not give your data scientist or your analyst the right data, right? This is going to be the problem as enterprise architects. All of us are going to face this, right? And what happens when you compromise on your end customers' privacy? GDPR will ensure your organization pays 4% of your revenue as a fine. Imagine losing 4% of revenue every year for a fine. That's a huge amount. Apart from that, there will be lawsuits. Apart from that, there will be individual brand image compromise. All that will happen. That is with the problem of losing privacy. If you lose data utility, your own AI/ML or data investments you have done, those will go waste because you don't have the right data and your data investments are not going to anyway give you the right ROI, right? So that is the prime problem which we face, focusing on privacy versus utility, right? And what do we recommend, right? In this space, there are three areas. Any data, it could be anything. It could be an order, it can be an image. There is always three parts to the data, right? What is the analysis you want to do on the data? That's what we all see as technologists. But what is the privacy? Whose data are you doing? And what is the human context? What is the intent of creating this data? These are the three elements you need to see in as a data scientist or a data analyst, right? And we recommend a framework to find data first. So we'll see this in action also in the demo, right? So first step, what we recommend is to discover. Your data can be in mainframes, it can be in RDBMS, it can be sitting in your Azure data lake, it can be in files, it can be in Parquet files. Find all that data. Find where all this data has individual end customers' privacy there, right? That is what is the second phase. Next, you define where all you need to protect this data before you use the data, right? To protect the data, what is the right data design you need to understand? Hey, this is a rows and columns. This way I can protect. This is an unstructured data from a call center. I can protect it using natural language processing. I have an image. I can protect it only when I use deep learning. So the right model for protecting is what you will do in the design. And finally, there is delivery. Once you find the data, you define what you have to protect, you design how to protect it, then you scale up and give this data to your data analyst or your data scientist. So that's the delivery part, right? Where you scale, increase the number of data records which are there, etc. So this discover, define, design, and deliver your data is a framework we recommend. And how does this work on Azure, right? Imagine this scenario, right? Imagine some of you would have worked in telco or a bank. So I'll take one of the scenarios. So imagine there is a telco. Uh, uh, in UK, it could be British telco, could be Verizon in the US. India, it could be Airtel, right? Data in that organization will come in many formats. It can be unstructured data, which call center agents write in their notes. It could be semi-structured data, JSON files, XMLs, Swift files. They could have data coming through their Azure data factory. They could have RDBMS, which is sitting, SQL servers, which are sitting, right? And they could also have data streams, Kafka data streams, etc. All this data has to be discovered, right? Before it discovered, you ingest all this data, you put it in a clean room, right? Clean room is a logical concept. It can be on Azure or Azure data lake, where you push all this data, do a data discovery, find where all sensitive data sits today. PHI data, PII data, you would have heard about it. An end customer's age, corporate email ID, local address, all these things are sensitive information. First name, last name, credit card number, social security number, or any government approved ID card, Aadhaar card, PAN card. All these things are sensitive information. So we will first discover where all this sensitive information is there so that it doesn't cause a privacy breach in your next step. Then you define, you check. Once you know all these things, you start encrypting data, tokenization of data you will do either through your Azure. Azure gives AES 256, or you can use an external product like Infosys Data Privacy Suite, which will encrypt this data, right? Then in the design phase, you can look at mining this data, dynamically masking the data, and also check if there is consent taken on the right data, right? And finally, this data can be scaled up. You can augment the data. I have 10 records, I need 1 million records. Yes, you can augment the data. You can wrangle on this data to see if this data is useful. And then finally, also have a provision to archive and dispose this data correctly. That is the full life cycle, discovery to delivery, right? And what we recommend is to use Azure Purview for data discovery. And this can also feed data into Azure Analytics or your Azure AI ML pipeline, right? But we don't have to restrict it only to that. You can also feed it into your cloud pipeline. It can also feed and do audit reports for compliance. GDPR compliance I need, right? I need data for it. Yes, you can do. And also the most common offshoring requirement. My test teams don't have the right data. Can you give that? Yes, we can mine from this clean room. You can mine data and give it to your testers, right? So this is a efficient way to to manage your data. Right? And when you manage, this is a quick conceptual view, right? The data will always have two parts, the data utility and the assurance. And both these things should be auditable at every instance of time. Now what we'll do, we'll take a step back and probably look at a specific use case, right? And some of these use cases, you can relate to it as a user, right? So most of you would be using, you would have an internet connection, you have a phone connection, right? And many of the times you might be, this internet sucks, it doesn't work very well, and my phone is not good. And you tend to influence others, right? Like today morning I was telling, our internet connection is very patchy, should we change it? Should we buy a better connection, etc. Right? So that is influencing, right? I influenced the prime decision maker in my house, which is my wife, right? I told, hey, this is not there. But this extends, right? You influence your friends, you influence your social circle, right? And that influence will cost an organization like Airtel or Verizon, right? So they are very interested to find, hey, how is this a dissatisfied customer influencing others, or the other way around? How is a satisfied customer positively influencing the other customers? And this is not applicable only to telco, right? Everywhere this is applicable. Word of mouth, brand awareness, so influence. There are people in YouTube who have careers on made out of this, right? They are called the influencers or brand influencers, right? Now that data, if you're looking at my screen, there is Becky and Hardy, right? Say Becky is not very satisfied. Her score is very low. She doesn't like the service. But she can talk to Hardy, who's got a decent score. He's got a good service. But she can influence him and tell, you know what, let's switch broadband, right? Let's look at something else, right? To do analysis of this, you might be using a predictive analytics model, a bivariate analysis. But to do that, you will compromise on Becky's data. You will know where Hardy lives. You will know their endpoints, phone number, etc. Right? And that's a clear breach of privacy. So what we suggest is build this logical and physical layer, right? Where data can be anonymized and at the same time utility is maintained, right? So we will look at this framework, right? Discover data. We know data will be sitting in their call records. It will be sitting in their CRM application, right? Take the data. We'll anonymize that specific data, right? And then we push the data into we transform the data and put it into an Azure data lake, which will be a clean data or a clean room, which will actually give this correlation between these two entities. And then you can correlate, give it to your data science team, all that you can do, right? But before you do the ingestion, do the cleanup, right? And so that is what we also want to show you in action. I'll quickly show this also. Imagine this scenario, right? And somebody from Airtel or Verizon who's looking at this data, right? He should be able to find all the data which is there on his Azure or not on Azure, right? And what you're seeing, this product is currently deployed on an Azure ecosystem, right? So you will be able to assess all the data stores which are there. You can define specific data privacy controls before you actually use the data, right? You can, once you implement these controls, right? Hey, I mask data, I anonymize the data, I synthetically generate data, I subset this data. Each of this entity can be monitored. Each of this data privacy control jobs can be monitored, right? And finally, data privacy, there is no silver bullet for it. It's a journey through which every organization goes through. As your digital maturity improves, your data privacy maturity also should improve, right? So we enable you to monitor and secure that data also, right? So let's look at that use case, right? You had call center data, right? You have probably network inventory, which will tell which products our Becky and Hardy use, right? Their social influencing could be there on files. You could have CRM applications like SuccessFactors, Salesforce, etc., where all this data could be sitting, right? So what we recommend is start with a quick portfolio view, right? Do the before you do discovery. This is like a prerequisite. Take a stock of all your data sources in one place, right? Which includes your network inventory, service assurance. It could be anything, right? And this is absolutely applicable in any scenario, right? This is what you see in a telco. You can also look at the similar one in a financial sector also, right? And data stores could be very diverse, right? In a finance or a bank, you will still have data in mainframes. You will have still data in SQL, right? Your Azure SQL can be there. You will have data in files, Parquet files, Azure data lake. Data could be sitting. Those will be in the others category, right? And other packages, applications which run on Azure or don't run on Azure, like SAP doesn't run on Azure, but that data is also something you need to consider, right? So step one, connect to all these data stores. We have these pre-built adapters already built. So it will connect to the data stores, get all the data, right? That is step one. Now, if you look at, you're looking at my screen, data privacy, right? Data privacy, which data to find the sensitive or which data is not sensitive, right? So there are these multiple regulations your customers might be struggling on, right? Like if the customer is based out of US, California Act of Protection, Consumer Right Act. If they are based out of Europe or any other place, GDPR. If they are based out of India, India Act of PDP is coming up, right? According to what does that mean? Aadhaar card is sensitive, address is sensitive. What is GDPR telling, right? Amount, building ID, credit card details are all sensitive, right? Now, these pre-built templates are already built, right, in the product. So you take that and then you do a data discovery, right? This is step one in any data privacy exercise. In my view, in any data exercise, this is where we should start the journey with, right? Find where all sensitive information is there in your ecosystem, right? It could be in applications, it could be in data store. And we all know social security number in US is very sensitive. With that, you can literally find who that customer is. So it will tell, hey, there are 10 data stores where all sensitive information is already sitting, right? Once you get that, you can actually do the data protection, right? So data protection, you can do, it's very easy to mask data and lose the whole data utility, right? If you are looking at my screen, there could be masked data and unmasked data, right? So for example, equipment ID, it's a very sensitive information. So it has to be masked, right? I'll also show you some data which is more relatable, right? Yes. So if you're looking at it, here, customer data, right? Customer record can have first name, that has to be protected. Customer phone number has to be protected. Account ID, right? And even more difficult is your social security number. If you go and mask it or make it or completely destroy that data utility, your reports will stop running, right? And second thing is, your parent table could be your customer master, but your child tables also have to have that referential integrity, right? So what you need to focus on is build a product or use a product which can maintain this referential integrity, right? And how do you maintain it? There are certain techniques called deterministic techniques where you ensure parent table, child table, and the grandchild table are mapped, right? So that is one way to protect the data. And you will always find when you are doing data, any data activity, you will always expect, production has 10 million records, but for a data analysis, I just need 1 million record. Can we do it? Yes. You need to also have a view to subset this data, right? Connect to the data store, run a subset configuration, right? Hey, you know what? Credit card details is this. All the cases which are created in the last 3 months, you take that data and move it into a masking configuration. Apply the data protection and then move this data into your non-production environment, right? That is something you will definitely need, right? What happens once this data is on a secure, clean room on Azure, on your Azure data lake, right? We also give you a provision to query this data, right? If you're looking at it, you should have a provision to mine this data securely so that data from multiple tables can be pulled and when it is shown to a data analyst, the end customer data is already masked. So this is called dynamic data masking, right? So multiple techniques you can protect your data, right? We saw static masking. You need to think about dynamic masking, which includes virtualization also, or securely mining this data. It also includes subsetting data. Take a small portion of it, move to your non-production. And also, many of us talk about data pipelines. You know, my organization is highly automated. I need data pipeline. Can you give masking as a service? Yes, we can give you masking, tokenization, etc. as a service. All you need to do is a REST API call to this instance. We will expose it. You call it automatically. When you move to the next environment, it will mask the data and push it. This is very useful when data in transit has to be masked, right? And it really works. You can also tell, you know what, I already have an Azure ecosystem. They already have a key manager, right? I will use only the Azure key. That is also possible. You can use the Azure Key Vault configuration, use that key to protect your data, and still leverage the end-to-end masking algorithms which are there, right? Many times as data privacy architects, we always try to mask data, encrypt data, anonymize data. You don't have to do all the time. You can simply synthetically generate this data also, right? If you are looking at my screen, right, there is, if you give 5 records, you have synthetic generator of data, which will make it into 1 million records, 2 million records, right? Just I'll give you an example, which all of us can relate to, right? Contact tracing. So India's contact tracing app, some of you might already have it in your phone, Arogya Sedu app, right? Imagine India's population. You have 1 billions of records available, right? But this app had to be built, rolled out in time, right? So we had to synthetically generate data to even test that app before it could be rolled out to general public. How do we think we did it? So this sample data was generated on EDPS, created, given it to teams with NASCOM help. Synthetic data was generated. Every individual data, we cannot compromise somebody's privacy, right? So we synthetically generated data and gave it. And this synthetic data need not be rows and columns like what you're seeing. It could be images. I have a vision algorithm I have built on Azure. I don't have enough images. No image algorithm or vision image detection algorithm will work until you put 40 images to it. How will you generate 40 images? Where will you find that image? You have to synthetically generate that image, right? Similarly, call center chatbots. How do you test and train them? They need a ton of data to even test. That use cases will not be even available with you. So you can synthetically generate this data, put it in an Azure data lake, which we call the clean room, and then you push it to your data science team, right? So that is what you can do. We spoke about proactive privacy assessments, right? So all that we saw so far is a data scientist work, right? Or a precursor for a data scientist work. And what I'm also going to talk about is a little more regulatory, right? I hope you guys don't find it too boring, right? Many times your data sets which are being used in your organization has to be constantly reviewed by your data privacy office, right? They will have certain assessments, they'll have Excel sheets. Probably they still use Excel sheets where they do assessments. Here on the product, you don't have to use any Excel sheets. What we recommend is an automated workflow where at every quarter, you simply run this assessment, privacy gap assessment, privacy impact assessment, and it will give you that score. So you can see how good data privacy is maintained in your organization, right? And finally, this whole process on Azure can be absolutely automated, right? You don't have to have an email clutter. You can simply have, you know, Azure testing in progress. I need performance test to be done, right? Uh, and I need 2 million records to be created for CRM application, right? And you can pick up a specific application. You can have that entitlement created. You can have a start date and end date. So the entitlement is already built in and you create this record, right? this request can be added or it can be connected to your organization service now, right? But the whole workflow of requesting data, managing the data, running the data privacy template, anonymizing this data and giving it back to the customer can be automated. It's a simple self-service mode is what you need to get to, right? Then only your data pipeline is truly automated. Otherwise, it will still have these manual interventions at every point of time, which will only reduce the efficiency of the whole process. Right? Okay, so that's a quick demo for all of you guys. I hope you found it engaging, right? So what did we see? A quick recap, right? Um, all of us work on enterprise class problems is what we solve, right? And there are specific data privacy security goals organizations will have. And why is it this happening? Absolutely, because of remote work happening. People, your customers, your employees, your partners, everybody is working remote. Some of us are also offshoring work, right, to India or other places, right, or within your organizations, right. I have a US subsidiary, I have an India subsidiary. When I have to send data there, still that is also offshoring, right? You have to ensure that data privacy controls are put. Lot of regulatory compliance you need to take care of your data. You need to bring in dynamic application security, right? Static encryption will not do the job. You need to bring dynamic application security. And all the CIO, CTO, you talk to them today, all of them will be talking about creating a culture of data privacy, right? So how do we do it, right? These are the key capabilities we kind of saw, right? Sensitive data discovery, we saw data source protection, encryption, obfuscation, masking, anonymization, all these things are techniques, right? We saw lineage, we saw inventory management. How do we connect to diverse set of data stores, get that data, right? And you shouldn't break the lineage or traceability of data also, right? Then we also saw about test data generation, data for augmentation, AI, ML. You don't really need data every time from production. You can synthetically generate the data, right? And then we also saw about data subsetting. How do you take a small subset from your production and use it, right? We also have process enablers. Some of them you saw, privacy impact assessment, a smart PI or a data inventory. And what we recommend is a privacy by design, right? And what you saw was deployed on Azure. It's given as a service on our own polycloud environment, but you can deploy it in your Azure environment or on-prem and still connect to Azure. All deployment options are available, right? That's what I had for you guys today. I just wanted to take a few minutes, look at some of the questions you guys have, and then go on from there. Any questions, thoughts, comments so far? I know I've taken around 45 minutes of time. Any questions? Or is it like the wrong time of the day to ask for questions? So let me ask you a question. Have you ever faced any data privacy breach? Have you seen your organization asking to be careful about the data you use for AI/ML? Have you ever encountered such a situation? Anybody? Okay. Okay. So okay. So I'll quickly go around, talk about how you can manage that data, right? Say many of the organizations, they will have their own set of PII, PHI data, which has to be maintained, right? So that inventory will be sitting in your data privacy office as we speak, right? So that inventory is something you need to be very cognizant of. You should know where this inventory is. If not, you talk to your data privacy officer. They will give you this inventory, right? And this is your starting point to use it for your data analysis. You check which of the key areas or key fields you cannot use for AI/ML, right? And then you apply, ask them what are the regulatory templates you have to apply, right? Is it GDPR is applicable? Is India Act applicable for this data? What kind of customers are there? All these things you should know before even you come to the AI/ML, right? And most importantly, when you are looking at the data which is flowing in, right? You should also have a lineage view of it, right? Say, for example, the same example we spoke about, NPS, right? Net Promoter Score, you will find the customer's address setting. You will find the customer's phone number setting. You will have their name, etc. But you will not know from which of the sources this data got created, right? So run it with a lineage platform, right? Azure today gives you some basic lineage. If not, use a lineage tool like Colibra, right, which will give you that end-to-end traceability, right? And because of that end-to-end traceability you will actually get into each entity and you can protect that well, right? All these things are still only proactive controls. Even after this, you can still lose data. Absolutely, that will happen. But at least it will give you a first line of defense. You don't really have to directly lose this data as it goes on, right? And if you need more details on data privacy, etc., I have some of these links which I have shared with you. You can find us on Azure Marketplace also. I'll share some of these links in the chat window. Feel free to check it out when you guys have time, right? And and I also want to conclude with this particular image, right? Any data journey, right? It starts with ingestion. It starts with ingestion of data. Again, like we spoke, data can be in a stream, it can be unstructured data, etc. But data ingestion will happen. You need to ensure data is discovered, right? Data discovery can be on pattern match. You can apply pattern match. You can apply the regulatory templates, or sometimes you need to use AI/ML to find this data, right? Then you protect this data. For protecting data, you can use virtualization. You can use any of the encryption techniques we spoke about. You can mask the data, right? And then you take this data for using it for your data pipeline. Sometimes you need to transform this data. Sometimes you need to cleanse this data before you put it for your model development training. We can also give you capabilities to wrangle this data, right? Hey, I can do feature engineering on it. I have this data, it's clean. No individual data privacy has got breached. Let me wrangle it. Let me find how the correlation happens between the net promoter score and the customer usage. Can we wrangle the data, right? So that is another area you can look at. And most importantly and most ignored part is managing this data, and finally archiving and deleting also. Many times when you use data for AI/ML or any data centric analysis, the data is usually has to be archived or it has to be deleted, right? Or this is what we call as the secure disposal of data. So that is also something you need to keep into mind when you do this end-to-end journey, right? And what I also want to do is conclude with this clean room. So anytime you have a scenario like this, look at building this clean room in your organization, right? Look, it need not be only an Azure-based data lake also, right? There are customers we have um, who have it on a Hadoop ecosystem, right? This product you see has undergone 10 years of evolution. So we have 60 plus customers who use it today, right? Many customers are already on cloud, but many are still not in cloud because of various reasons. Their industry doesn't let them go into cloud so easily. Like all the banks, they still use mainframe, they still use Hadoop. So the whole ecosystem of discover, define, design, deliver, you don't have to restrict it only to Azure. You can do it on your Hadoop ecosystem. You can do it on an Oracle ecosystem. We have even done it on an SAP ecosystem, right? Absolutely. And it's cross cloud also, right? You will see a similar version. You can apply this framework on AWS also, GCP also, absolutely, right? Irrespective of what is your technologies landscape, what is your technology which you are using. It can be on-prem, it can be on cloud. That should not be a reason you do a data breach, right? You can still maintain the same data privacy controls if you think about building a clean room, right? And this is an architectural pattern today, right? In your enterprise, can I create a clean room, right? Clean room doesn't mean the data is clean, right? Data doesn't have a chance of a data breach, right? PII data is identified, PII data privacy controls are already defined. You have taken the right consent from the user, and finally, you've also delivered it, and you are able to scale it for your data-centric view, right? One last thing is sharing of data is always a problem, irrespective of what you use, right? Sharing of data, example of this is pharma or a bank, right? They share a lot of data, right? Your data from your bank goes to your credit card company. It goes to your employer. It goes to other financial institutes. Like for example, if you are filing data and income tax in India, right? ITR or income tax authority will specifically know the data and your bank details. So banks has to share the data to income tax department. Everybody knows this, right? How do they share it? Today, is there a chance when they share, somebody can breach the data? Yes, probably somebody can breach the data. So there are specific ways you can add noise so that the end customer data is not seen, right? Or you can share it through a hardware enclave, right? These are some of the areas you will see investments in the next forthcoming years, right? A lot of startups work on building hardware enclave, and they are trying to move data privacy away from the software world and kind of make a hybrid between a hardware and a software kind of a protection model is what they're building, right? That is something you will see, right? And you will see Azure also having a lot of focus on hardware enclave, right? We work with University of Berkeley to build that enclave on Azure, right? And only when you have such strong encryption capabilities, it will really help to protect this data. Especially you will be reading so many breaches happening, right? The data from social media, say data from your internet providers, data from your retailers, all of them are getting breached, right? Including hospital data, right? And patients' data also gets breached. Why? Because everybody needs data. Marketing campaigns run on this data, right? And why should they really breach on your data privacy for their business model, right? So that's why every time you check if there is a consent given, every time check there is a need for a clean room, right? And if you have any other questions on how to do this for our organization, how do I set up my AI/ML pipeline, which has these logical and physical boundaries, right? How do I encrypt data? How do I give that privacy by design or privacy experience for all my data stores? Feel free to write to us. I've shared some of the links there. I've also shared this deck uh, with the organizers, right? So write to us, find us on LinkedIn. We will help you how to manage this data. It can be on your Azure ecosystem or it can be off your Azure ecosystem, right? So that's all I had for you guys today. I'll take a pause here. If there's any questions, I'll address that. Otherwise, Kamlesh, are you okay with the time so far?
Yes, perfect. We have 10 minutes to for the next session. If
Okay.
anybody has any questions, they can answer here or stay on the online chat here.
Okay. And I just want to conclude by again telling you guys, thank you for sticking around. Thanks for taking time on a Saturday. And that's the session code 39517. So please use that, put it in the feedback form, win the prize, and continue learning, right? And hopefully this session gave you some background on the privacy paradox and data privacy. So whatever, if it was useful, good. That's good to hear.